Welcome, everybody, to this week's version of the FareCompare video podcast. My name is Rick Sini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FareCompare.com. This is episode number 15. We certainly want to thank you for watching. Hopefully, you'll get some info out of this podcast. We'll try to keep it nice and tight today. We're going to talk a little bit about some ski resorts. Love skiing, especially here in North America. We're also going to go over briefly Delta's pet policy, a few minor changes there, which we'll talk about a little bit. We'll also have a chance to talk about procrastinators. I know if you're watching this podcast and you have not purchased your holiday tickets yet, you are definitely a procrastinator. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll take a couple questions that were sent in. I'd love to do that as well. And joining me today to kick the podcast off is our editor from the site at FareCompare.com, Ann McDermott. Hey, Ann.
Hey, Rick. We've got some really good questions. I think everybody will enjoy them, even if it's not their problem. But so do stick around. But where are we going to start today?
Yeah, I think we let's take a little tour of North America and the ski destinations. We've got a new article out there by one of the folks on our team, Erin, and I think she's done a pretty good job of ranking some of the best places here in the U.S. Starting off with Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which I've been to a few times. Beautiful place to visit.
It's beautiful year round too. Even if you're not much of a skier, it's just lovely. And they've got that National Elk Preserve nearby, or at least I think it's national. There's a lot of elk there anyway.
Yeah, you've got the Teton National Park, and it's not that easy to get to. You're going to end up in a smaller aircraft. So if you're looking for, slide in to Denver and drive, an hour and a half up the mountain, that's not what Jackson Hole is all about. So yeah. It definitely is a destination that you have to want to go to. Also includes Snowbird, Utah, right there in the top two there.
Well, the thing I like about skiing in Salt Lake City is you're like 30 minutes from a bunch of good resorts. When you go to Salt Lake, it's probably one of the closest, metropolitan big airport places within reach of skiing, and it's beautiful skiing there too. There's
The interesting thing is I've been there a few times, but only for mountain golf, because I can certainly see the lifts and stuff like that, but I haven't actually been to park cities in those locations. And another one that I have sort of a strange story about is the Squaw Valley Resort. It's definitely interesting, in the Olympic Valley of California.
You don't hear much about it anymore, and yet it's a great place to ski, or at least people that ski regularly there tell me it's wonderful. But I think it there are so many places in the U.S. these days, and new places seem to be cropping up all the time, or getting facelifts, that kind of thing, that you don't hear about some of the older places, like, for example, Sun Valley. I always thought that Idaho place is just wonderful, but it's not on this particular list, but trust me, it makes a bunch of lists.
Yeah, I noticed that Telluride made the top 10 list. Certainly my business partner and co-owner here at FareCompare.com would have been upset, since he lives in Durango, Colorado, and Telluride just sort of a little scoot around the edge, an hour and a half or so around the corner there. So I know Purgatory didn't make it, which is right next to his house there, but at least Telluride made it.
Well, we've got a Canadian listing, Whistler, which is it's wonderful, particularly for super skiers. If you are a great skier, you will love it. But I do know that my daughter, when she was about 7 or 8, she also went there. So there is stuff for the little ones and lesser skiers, but it's wonderful if you're really good.
And you can also take the tour of the windmill that's up there as well. We actually did that as well. Not so easy to do when you have ski boots on. A little bit easier in the summertime if you're up there. So definitely come check out the article on the top 10 ski resorts in North America. Erin's done a great job, and then you can link out and it'll take you directly to some of those, and you can check them out. And certainly we know that the last 3 weeks in January, first couple weeks in February, last couple weeks in February, except for President's Day weekend, are a great time to buy tickets to any of these locations. Pretty cheap out there at the moment.
And I just want to say one thing. We've been talking about skiers. Yes, these places are for you snowboarders too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I think that's even a more growing area of segment, especially at some resorts up there. So definitely something to check out. So let's talk a little bit about, I know one of your favorite topics, because I'm positive that you've pulled up the Daily Puppy today. It is the Daily Puppy, right? Not the
Daily
Cat.
Puppy, like dog shaming. There's a bunch of sites. I do love dogs.
So when and I know that you track this very closely, and that's pet transportation policies. We did have a pet airline there for a while. It didn't make it through the recession, unfortunately. But a few little differences on the Delta cabin pet policy. What's up with that?
Well, it's a pretty big difference. They're no longer going to accept pets as checked baggage. You know, usually there's a choice. If your dog is small enough, it can go fly in the cabin. Otherwise, you have to put it in with the baggage. Some people aren't crazy about that idea because, you know, sure. I don't like the idea, but I don't really travel with my dog. I mean, it's expensive enough for me. And,
my daughter and I go over to our neighbor's house when they're on vacation and feed the dogs many times.
Yes,
I don't actually have one.
That's a good way to do it.
So they get, my daughter ends up, I end up usually doing it. She blows it off, and then she's the one that gets the $20 when they get back. But I think it's a little cheaper than some of those pet hotels that they have that I've seen. Where you can actually fire up the webcam and take a look at it. And I know you've reported before on cargo-oriented issues that they've had with pets, and they do keep that statistic at the Bureau of Transportation.
They do, and there are rarely does a month go by without some animal or pet that's being transported, and by all the airlines that doesn't have injured or something worse.
Well, clearly American lets you actually bring dogs on, because my daughter yelped. We were coming back from Puerto Vallarta. We were standing in line. My daughter turned to the right, and basically a big pug's face had actually brushed up against her. This woman had it in a big carry bag that she was carrying it on the airplane. So not that my daughter's afraid of dogs, but when you turn around and you've got one of those Daily Puppy pictures staring you right eyeball to eyeball, it can be a little disconcerting.
Well, from now on, Delta is saying, okay, kept the pets in the cabin, fine, but not checked baggage. They do have another option. There's something called Delta Cargo. Now, the problem with this, a couple of problems, and I'll say it's a problem. I don't know if others would consider it so. But it seems as though it's a little bit more expensive, but also there's no guarantee this cargo shipment will be on your flight. So if you have to transport a larger dog, it may entail an extra trip to the airport. Why Delta is doing this, I'm not sure. I reached out to Delta, and they were very nice. They got back to me very quickly, and I had said, why the change? And basically, I just got a happy response about how much Delta loves pets. So,
there you go. They look at the Daily Puppy as well.
I don't really know why. It may just be easier. It may be less of a hassle for them, and maybe they want to make sure nothing happens to dogs. But I wonder. This is what I wonder, and I wonder this about a lot of airlines too, not just Delta. Are more and more people going to say, oh, my dog's an emotional support animal, so I'm bringing him on board with me, and on comes this 200-pound Saint Bernard. Who knows?
By the way, notably, that is an exception along with military members as well on the Delta policy. So we should note that if you're U.S. military or their dependents, you can actually bring those, and you can actually check those. I'm not sure that's a great idea, but unfortunately, any dog that's over 15 pounds, that's the only candidate you have unless you try this new Delta Cargo method. Yeah.
Now, if you are somebody that depends on, say, the traditional seeing eye dog, the guide dogs, they are welcome on board anytime. They don't get their own seat, so they have to sort of sit by your feet. But, these dogs are beautifully behaved.
Absolutely, I am. I'm now in the mood to go buy a dog for Christmas for my daughter, so that when she goes to college in a couple years, I'll get to take care of it. So
I got news for you. You'll be taking care of it right now.
I know I see all of my friends that happens to. Seemed like a good idea at the time, is what I hear normally. But again, interesting that we see these changes. I mean, we've seen Southwest make some changes in the last couple of years. So, you need to, if you're going to do that, if that's what you really want to do, and I think both of you and I agree that's not a great idea to check a dog as cargo. There are different ways you can handle that. So, let's talk a little bit about procrastination. I just did some radio shows this morning, and I got a bunch of questions. Are there still good deals for the Christmas and New Year holidays coming up? My stock answer for I don't know how many years now is that there's not really that great a deal. In fact, what you're looking for in that time frame is a better bad deal.
Yeah, it's not like there were ever good deals.
Yeah, and so, if you're a procrastinator, well, first of all, let's define what a procrastinator is. Generally, that would be somebody that's shopping for airfare inside of 30 days before departure. Now, clearly, we're sitting here in early December and getting close to mid-December, not too soon, and that is definitely procrastinating if you want a holiday ticket. So anybody inside of 30 days before travel, there's a couple things that you should know. First of all, airlines have 3-day advance purchase, 7-day, 14-day, 21-day, and 30-day advance purchase ticket. They progressively get cheaper as the number of advance days gets up. So if you're inside of 30 days or inside of 21 days, you want to make sure you're aware of those marks and you buy those tickets at those marks. Basically, you need to shop as early as you can in the procrastination 30-day window and buy that ticket. Now, what I will say is, procrastinators and to some degree last-minute travelers have a couple of options. For example, we've seen in the past where packagers who basically negotiate airfare ahead of time as part of their deal, and you don't really see what the difference in price between the hotel and the air are. If you pick a cheaper hotel with airfare, you can actually toss the hotel. In many cases, it's going to be cheaper at the last minute or for procrastination than you'll find on the market itself. The reason for that is they pre-negotiated that airfare well ahead of time. It wasn't cheap back 60 or 70 or 80 days ago, but it is cheaper now. So that's one option. Certainly another option for procrastinators is seeing if you have your own miles or if a family member or friend has a bunch of miles and you can barter for those miles. Most people don't realize that anybody that has miles or points, and we know that those programs have changed pretty dramatically in the last 2 or 3 years, switching to revenue-based system. If they have those, they can write you a ticket out of their account simply by putting your name when they redeem the ticket. You don't have to pay a fee, just transfer the miles, go ahead and put the name on the ticket, and it doesn't cost them anything, and then you can barter as you see fit.
One thing I know from firsthand experience is that if you fly during a time of day when other people don't want to fly, your ticket will go down significantly. I know this is one of your long-time tips, but I just bought a ticket cross country. Unfortunately, there's no direct flight. So this is kind of a pricey ticket anyway, and this is for an older person. So I wasn't able to have them fly overnight or fly super late or like 11 o'clock at night
or fly Spirit Airlines.
And because I couldn't do that, I just watched the price go up, right. And it was like yay. So if you can fly at odd times, or like just think of when you'd like to fly and then fly the other times. If you can do that, I know you can save.
Yeah, you can check alternate airports too. A lot of the airlines do have weekender pricing for what is quote unquote called distressed inventory. Typically that's like a Thursday, Monday departure return. You can check for that as well. In general, once you get inside 7 days, for sure you're going to be treated as a business traveler whose boss is buying their ticket and can afford a lot more than the rest. 14 days on some routes if it doesn't have a low-cost airline. So certainly the 14-day mark is one you don't want to try to cross a threshold. But if you do, there are a few options, but not really good ones. Now, what we've seen also, Anne, is some connecting flights, way undercutting the most convenient flights, especially at the last minute for preferred procrastinators. So, it may not be the greatest routing. You may have 2 stops or 1 stop with a long connection, but those are typically going to be way cheaper than, a very convenient routing, a nonstop routing, for example.
And even at Christmas, New Year's, you should still compare. You shouldn't go to a single airline site because you know it's the cheapest.
Comparison shopping is your best bet there as well. And picking the right day as well, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, this holiday season, if that's when you are. That's generally, by the way, the cheapest days to fly in general. It just so happens that the holidays land on a Friday, so it makes that true even for those, when the holiday lands on Tuesday and Wednesday. It's not always the case.
How about some questions from customers?
Yeah, sure. Love the questions part.
Okay. The first one is from Bob in Santa Cruz, and Bob sounds like my kind of guy. He says, and I quote, "I have just lost my wallet and my ID and credit cards, and last month I lost my passport. That said, I have no picture ID, and I've got a flight this week back home. I've replaced my credit cards, but alas, my ID is not so easy to replace." That is true, Bob. Is there anything I can do to make the flight back home?
Well, wow, that's like every form of ID. Bob is off the grid now. I didn't think that was possible. But okay, so you've lost all your different forms of ID, right? So you can stop by at TSA. And by the way, for folks that are out there, it is always a good idea to take your ID or not so much your credit cards, unless depending on how good you are with Apple Phone and Apple Wallet and some of these Android wallet products. You certainly want to take a picture of your ID and of your passport, put it up in the cloud. That's always very helpful if you get into this situation. That tip was actually taught to me by a flight attendant that said that they actually forget their passport many times when they have to run quickly to the airport, and that helps them out to get through there. And at that point, if you don't have any picture ID and you do have credit cards and whatnot, you do have to drop by the TSA office. I don't know exactly what their procedure are, but they will allow you to get on the flight if they vet you. They can figure out some way to vet you, but you have to be there way early at TSA and find the right folks at TSA to get back home.
Well, I think it's a matter of just going to the checkpoint, explaining it, and sometimes it's just a matter of them pulling you aside for 5 minutes. I can tell you there is a person of my very close acquaintance who had all their ID lost, including various credit cards, passport, driver's license, and she managed to just have a little chat with the TSA person. Now, this was before security got extra tight in recent weeks.
Yeah, so you got to be careful of that too.
Yeah,
I know. I had trouble. Well, not really trouble, but I had a temporary driver's license because I went to change out my driver's license. They actually cut the picture out of the old one and then gave me this little piece of paper. I showed them the piece of paper there. They looked it over very carefully. Apparently, and by the way, it didn't have a picture ID on it. In that particular case, and I was able to get through. So there is a way, and by the way, you're going to have to do that. Probably get a temporary ID until you can get a photo ID, for a driver's license. And Bob, quit losing stuff. I can't say much, Ann. I'll be honest with you. I did misplace my passport, caused me to miss a trip to South America, and so it does happen. It happens, and and my business partner's son had his passport. He and was at a train station and had his backpack stolen with his laptop and his passport. That was a huge hassle to get back as well because he was on a visa. So it can be a hassle. So definitely make sure that stuff's up in the cloud if you have a cloud account with a smartphone. And in these particular cases, TSA does have procedures. They know these things happen. They're processing almost 2 million passengers a day, at least domestically, going through security. So these things do happen more than you might think.
I'd say get to the airport like an hour earlier.
Yeah, at least an hour earlier. I wouldn't, it depends on at holiday season maybe a little bit earlier, but in general, an hour earlier than you normally would, which is typically an hour.
Okay, here's a nice question from, they're all nice questions, of course, but this one is from David from Atlanta, and he says, I just got engaged and we are getting married over my spring break. I know prices will be high, but any advice on how to get a decent price to a more than decent destination during spring break? Anything would help. Thanks, says
Sure.
David.
Yeah, no, this happens all the time, David, and it sounds like your spring break probably would be in the March or maybe even early April time frame. It's a little early to shop for then right now. Now, airlines do know exactly when your spring break is. It says, I think you said David from Atlanta, right? So they know
Right.
exactly when the Atlanta school districts are going to have their spring break. They'll raise the prices. You know, Delta being the major airline at that hub airport, definitely are going to raise the prices for Saturday, Sunday, and departures and returns on the other side of that week that you're off. So the other thing that you should do with that is, and I'll give you an example. I think it was maybe a couple of years ago we wanted to go to Disney, right? So we have choice, Orlando or California, like both of them actually. Ticket prices for Sunday to Saturday and Sunday to Sunday were about $1,100 to Orlando. Not a good thing. They were about $600 or $700 to California, LA, or you can actually go into John Wayne Airport there in Santa Ana, Orange County. And so we then looked at Tuesday, Saturday departure, right? That Tuesday, Saturday departure ended up being $300 round trip, actually to John Wayne Airport, which is much closer to the destination. So we ended up picking that, and we actually got a better hotel choice since we saved some money there.
So if you don't have to use up the whole week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday are the cheapest days to fly pretty much all the time. So as you point out, a Tuesday to Saturday itinerary, could be perfect.
Yeah, it's a 4-night trip. It's not a big 7-night trip. I know this is a spring break that has an engagement, getting married over spring break. So from a marriage destination standpoint, you're talking about places maybe like Las Vegas. You're maybe talking about a Caribbean resort destination, for example. So in those particular, it's a super special occasion, you definitely want to start shopping in early January for that ticket. Like I said, we talked a little bit about sort of procrastination earlier in the podcast. The best time to use those really expensive tickets, for example, is those free tickets that you may have or your family member may have, and they might, for example, I'd be happy to give my daughter my miles if that's what she wanted to do on something like that. So just be aware that those are some options as well. But you want to shop early, and see if you can pick out maybe an itinerary where you travel on one of the cheaper days to fly.
And we're seeing, in terms of destinations, if you want the Caribbean, we've been seeing sort of year-round good deals to like Nassau and Jamaica and Puerto Rico, and lately Grand Cayman. I'm seeing some great deals on JetBlue out of New York, particularly. But there's, you just comparison shop. Like at FareCompare, you could just look up Caribbean flights. But also, Florida has got deals. Some people like New York City, which, personally, I think is a great place to go any time of year. California.
And look, you could check out our native app, and you might see what overlaps with some cool events that you might attend, on your honeymoon. Yeah. That would be a good idea. You can download that at FareCompare.com/app. Really, it's called The Adventurous, so you can go out and find some adventures, and hopefully that overlaps with your spring break. You can check out airfare with that as well. These are tough questions when airlines know exactly when people want to go. They're going to raise prices automatically, not only electronically, their computer systems that do it. In many cases, they have some humans saying, hey, yeah, we know this weekend is a special weekend. It's a holiday. It's a spring break, for example. And it just makes it tougher to get a good deal, especially at the last minute, so don't procrastinate.
And thanks to Bob and David for submitting those questions. Thanks. We really appreciate it. And if anybody else has a question, customer.service@faircompare.com. So that's customer.service@faircompare.com.
Yeah, we'll get those questions, and we'll be happy to do them in the next podcast. And again, all these things we talked about, we have blog posts on the site. Come check them out. You can also look at other video podcasts with different topics. You can catch those on iTunes or SoundCloud platforms as well. And don't forget the Native app. The Native app is actually, in fact, we had another couple destinations today I noticed added. I check it every couple days to see what interesting new places have been added. So come check that out at FareCompare. And again, thanks for watching the podcast.
Thanks.